Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Dynasty Tradecast. This week brought to you by our sponsor, RotoQL. As always, I'm your host, Eric Bertzloff, better known on Twitter as @DynastyTrades, joined by Nathan, and not as always, because he's not here, Dan.
Without Dan, we are a very bearded podcast today, Eric. Beard talk, always a great audio podcast talk, but I feel like you've let your beard kind of grow back in a little bit.
Oh yeah, it's full right now. It's some next level stuff. I might just start having a Snapchat where I walk my dog and turn the camera around on me just so I can show off the beard, and then I can start selling my own Snapchat. Like I've been whoring your Snapchat out.
Yeah,
and Pal FF, by the way.
You keep on doing it on every podcast and tweeting several times. I think I've had like 4 people total through that whole process, and I appreciate everyone who has not followed me on Snapchat.
See, I feel like what this does is it highlights how many people over the years have muted me for retweeting trades. I feel like what happened here.
Exactly.
All right. Well, we've got a show. Another great week of fantasy football in the bag here. Before we get into the show, I do want to give everybody a quick reminder that you can support this very podcast by supporting the RotoViz Radio Network, the network that gives us a show, and our other non-shows per week on Patreon. By doing so, you'll gain exclusive access to RotoViz Live, our weekly Sunday morning video show answering all your fantasy football questions. Patronships start at just $5 per month and to provide exclusive access to RotoViz Live. That's 4 shows per month on top of 40 podcasts for just $5. Become a RotoViz Radio patron today to join an exclusive community of listeners, access premium content, and do your part in helping the network and the show grow. Continue to produce and help us produce high quality, industry leading programming.
Oh, this is the part where I talk. Speaking of exclusives, as a loyal podcast listener, you can get 30% off a RotoViz NFL Pass right now. That's right now, not tomorrow, not yesterday, right now. It's available through the NFL Podcast homepage, rotoviz.com/podcast. The season is here. It's not even just here. We're 5 weeks in, boys and girls.
Yes, we are.
Make sure you're ready. Make sure you're up on the game. Gain unlimited access to all of our NFL content and tools, so you'll get all the amazing value and support the podcast network. Yeah, support us. I like money. Eric likes money. Give us some money.
Yeah, okay, well, I'm not just going to stand here and say, give me money. You are also getting RotoViz. So, I mean, this is the time of year where you're going to be trying to compete for a championship, and one win that could have been a loss will change your fate down the road. So I always implore people to check out RotoViz because it really is a fantastic service and provides a ton of amazing content for the listeners and people who don't listen, I guess, that also subscribe to RotoViz. Okay, let's go ahead and get into the show. There was a surprise dropped on us, Nathan, about 2 hours ago. I believe even RotoWorld said it was out of nowhere, and it is Jay Ajayi's torn his ACL and is out for the season.
Yeah, this is an interesting one as a guy who he was getting lots of volume in that RB1 slot, not much behind him with Wendell Smallwood and, Corey Clement, I believe, was the third running back there. So he was kind of in position to get lots of volume. He was getting a decent amount, 15 to 20 touches a game, and he really wasn't doing much with it, scoring in that, 5, 6, 7, maybe throwing a 10-point game. Anyways, so
yeah, it was. I mean, week 1, I think people saw a mirage in him, but that was 2 TDs. But he only had 62 yards, and then week 2, he's looking at less than 10 points. Week 4, he was out week 3, but week 4, another 15 attempt game, only 11 points. And last week he only had 3. So overall, he's been kind of a dumpster fire this particular season.
Yeah, and when these type of injuries happen to a player that is struggling, this does produce the opportunity to try and sell his backup. Wendell Smallwood, he's a guy that many people actually were picking up on waiver wires the last couple of weeks, maybe because he was struggling and Smallwood was getting a few more opportunities. But if you can use this opportunity with him getting the immediate touches, selling immediate touches at the running back position is one of the easiest sells in Dynasty. So, I mean, I'm going out and, trying to sell Smallwood for a second, or maybe try and sell Smallwood in a couple seconds for a late first. That's probably not going to happen, but, those are the type of deals I'm looking to make if I have Wendell Smallwood on my roster right now.
Yeah, this one, Smallwood, I'm totally on board with you, Nathan. He's a guy that if you're able to get like a third for, then by all means get rid of him.
I mean, right now he has an RB1 role. I think that's worth a little more than a third, just because, I mean, unless obviously if you're not contending, I think it's fine to take an early third, but if you're contending, I think it's fine to keep that guy going through the bye weeks and going through injuries. He's a guy who should be getting touches in the short term at least.
Well, but I mean, also you have Clement who's going to come back. You have Sproles who's going to come back. So he's not exactly cemented into this role. Now, granted, he's looked okay this season, but yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly right. I mean, this is one where I wouldn't usually. When an injury happens and there's clear cut backup, I'll wait a week for them to show what they've done for a week and actually produce some production, and people freak out, overpay. But one thing I will say in this particular instance, I'm not going to try to get cute. I just worry that he's going to get his job just snatched from him after a week of production.
Yeah, and one way and obviously there's so many times we talk about how trade rumors and stuff like that are just so stupid in the NFL because they rarely come to fruition. But obviously the kind of, this one is a possibility. The one that's being highlighted on Twitter right now is Le'Veon Bell, who is seeking a trade, seeking a long-term extension. And the Eagles have a need at the running back position right now. And obviously, if you're the Steelers, you probably don't want to trade Bell in the conference. So trading him to the NFC does seem like a logical thing to do. So
I'll drop this breaking news on you here, Nathan. As of about 5 minutes ago, ESPN's Adam Schefter reporting the Eagles, quote, have not pursued a trade.
That's not even 5 minutes ago. That was a couple hours ago.
And have no plans to do so. Sorry, I'm looking at it I'm sure it's Eastern Standard Time. But yeah, basically they're saying they're not interested, or at least
they say that. But I mean, obviously either one of us could have egg on our face by the time that this comes out. But yep. I think that just because one report says they're not doing it doesn't mean that it's not going to happen.
You know what? I challenge you to eating dog poop. No, I'm just kidding. We're not doing this.
I survived one more week on that one. We won't beat that one to death. But we might. When it happens, I'll let you guys do that. But anyways, just to wrap up the Eagles situation, would you be buying low on Ajayi at all with the injury? If you could throw like a late second for him, or you pretty much just I'll pass.
Yeah, I mean, this is a guy who I think we were talking about it before the show, and I don't have a single Ajayi share, and that's very intentional. He scares the crap out of me, and I've just never thought he's looked that good to begin with. And then to be fair, when it was draft time, I planted a flag of no Ajayi ever. And I haven't found a reason to waver from that. So, no, I'm not going after Ajayi. And with the history of his knee injury, I assume he'll fall a little bit further than other running backs in this exact same situation. I think that people are going to overreact to the ACL with respect to his degenerative knee issue.
But just for the record, it is the non-degenerative knee that he tore.
And even then, it's not. I mean, it's a tendon tear, right? I mean, it doesn't have anything to do with his degenerative knee condition. So people are going to overreact. He's going to fall. I mean, I don't know if he becomes worth a third, then yeah, sure, maybe I'll buy him because he's going to find another role. But I don't realistically expect him to fall that much. I mean, are you a buyer for Ajayi at any given point? I guess what's that window for you where you would be like, oh wow, okay, now I have to have him on my team?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I would do like a third and a fourth, or a third, fourth, and a fifth type thing. And then everyone calls me up for making terrible offers like that. But legitimately, I wouldn't pay more than that for Ajayi right now. And honestly, if I don't have like IR spots to burn, I'm not sure I'd even go out and waste a roster spot on Ajayi, for an entire year. Because honestly, it's not certain he'll ever have the role that he had in Miami or the role he had as starting in Philly. He might not ever have it again because he's gonna be a free agent, and who knows who's gonna give off of torn ACL, in a second contract. So
yeah, this is exactly what I was gonna say. I was like, did you feel comfortable starting Ajayi this year when he had a clear-cut bell cow back role? No, you did not. So when are you ever gonna feel comfortable starting Ajayi? It's gonna be never. All right, let's move on to another guy that I'm pretty much never comfortable starting, and that is the breakout of Eric Ebron ?
Yeah, Eric Ebron has become the player that fantasy Twitter loves to hate, and for good reason most of the time. But I do think we go a little bit overboard when we're like, oh my goodness, why is he getting all this volume? Da, 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 da. Well, and clearly, obviously, a small sample, but through 5 weeks, he's the tight end 3 overall. Mm-hmm. He only has 1 week below 10 PPR points, 31 PPR points in week 5. So, I mean, those are certainly startable numbers, getting more than 10 PPR points every week at the tight end position. So I'm going to officially declare Eric Ebron is the Blake Bortles of tight ends. Everyone just says that he's so horrible that they just ignore the fact that he's putting up fantasy production, particularly Ebron in this new situation with the Colts, and Jack Doyle has been hurt. So I mean, the opportunity combined with the volume, it's hard to. I mean, honestly, I think it's hard to bench Eric Ebron right now, despite the fact that people think he's terrible and always drops the ball. I think that right now in the situation he's in, he is a very good fantasy tight end.
Yeah, I mean, and Jack Doyle will come back at some point, but even when Doyle was there, I don't think there was a lot of. You didn't see a lot of interest from Luck in him. I think Brissett was more interested in Doyle than Luck is. But yeah, I mean, you look at the tight end this year has just been an absolute nightmare. I mean, Jared Cook is the tight end 4, and Eric Ebron is the tight end 3. If you went back in time and told Dynasty Twitter that was going to be the case, they would have eaten you alive. So it's been a really interesting season for tight end. But yeah, I agree. His role is largely solidified. And I think most importantly, as you're watching every single other receiver on that Colts team drop footballs, Eric Ebron's the one guy who should be dropping the football who's not dropping the football. He's actually making great catches. So I'm not team Eric Ebron, but and I don't own him anywhere, but he's very startable. You got to plug and play him with this with the mess that this current tight end year is right now.
Yeah, and I think that even as owners, though, they aren't really realizing the points he's put. Maybe they are after a 31-point game. But
he was in the lineup this week.
I mean, sure. I'm using the Blake Bortles comparison because he's very much in the line of he's going to be cheaper than what his points really should be. You know, when Blake Bortles was putting up top 5, top 6 quarterback numbers, he was being drafted as like QB 22 in Dynasty. Well, Eric Ebron, you know, right now he's putting up tight end 3 numbers, and I'm guessing an ADP is probably, you know, late teens, early 20s, and that range as well. So I think that he's a good buy right now. Obviously, you're not really paying more than a second, so maybe an early third and a fourth type of thing.
Well, and that's not going to get it done for Ebron.
I mean, it might because people think he's so terrible, but
I'm telling you, the people that have him on their team, man, it's got to be a second at this point. And I mean, let's maybe put on our crazy bizarro hat here, Nathan.
Mm-hmm.
Is it possible that Eric Ebron has long-term dynasty value and finally got his shot with Andrew Luck, and Andrew Luck loves him?
I mean, I'd say like 40%.
That's a high percentage, right? I mean, that's if he has long-term dynasty value in this offense.
But the thing is that the 40% is that it happens, and then the 60% means like he's terrible in like 12 months. I think that that's much more likely that, you know, that happens, but you know,
there's worse people to buy with a second round pick, though, because if you're making a second round pick, what are the odds that they're terrible? Probably right around 60%, right?
Yeah, something like that.
So I mean, I don't know. To me, actually, and the more we talk about Ebron, I think he might be a buy at a second round valuation because I think there is. And I think largely Dynasty Twitter is. I mean, we're all making jokes. I think I made a joke that I never thought I'd see the world where he has the best hands on his team, but here we are. But it seems like it's reasonably that he can hold this value. And I mean, I don't know. Maybe Jack Doyle comes back and proves that all wrong. But I might go out and buy a few Ebron shares now that I'm thinking about it because it is he does have the pedigree for this, and there's certainly a non-zero chance, much larger than that he turns out to be a long-term asset and Andrew Luck's boyfriend.
There you go. All right, let's move on.
Boyfriend takes, by the way.
Yeah, there you go. On to our next set of players. We're going to talk some Patriots running backs. Everyone loves to talk Patriots running backs. Well, for once, we do love talking Patriots running backs with James White and Sony Michel. Both players are being productive. Both players are getting plenty of touches. Well, let's start with James White because certainly he's the less talked about, the less valued of the two in the Dynasty format. Do you think that people are going to start, you know, realizing that James White is an every week startable option in Dynasty and maybe value at that early second, maybe even a late first type value? Or do you think he's just a perennial guy who's always going to be cheaper than what his points should cost?
I mean, at this point, it's pretty tough to ignore. And the injuries, I think, have really highlighted, like, now that there's no other options, people can't just lean so heavily on their anti-Patriots running back approach to things. But White's a fantastic PPR option. And he's a guy that currently is the RB7 in a PPR league based off the numbers I'm seeing here. Well, this is crazy, Nathan. The RB8 is TJ Yeldon, so I know you like to see that guy you pounded the table for. But yeah, White's one of those guys that I think is sneaky. I have been trying to buy White everywhere I could for a third round pick, was never able to get that through. And I think now a second round pick might not be enough. And I don't know.
No, I promise you a second's not enough.
But I don't think I could never feel comfortable giving a first for him. I think Michelle would be the guy I would be more interested in targeting. But he's the guy that I had as the second option this year for me with all of my 102 picks, I took Michelle wherever I could and didn't have to. Took him at 111 in a place, as I recall. So he's the guy I would be more interested in, but he's going to be worth. I mean, he's still worth what, a first and a half right now, Nathan.
Who is this, Michelle?
Michelle.
Right now, according to Ryan, he's the third rookie going off the board in the latest ADP, going 103 after Barkley and Geis. And yeah, I mean, if it was like too late for
Geis is still going ahead of him, that's ridiculous.
I'm not sure it's ridiculous. I mean, as a draft capital zealot, I can't say that it's ridiculous, but I think that. I mean, I can't say it's not ridiculous. I'm talking backwards here, but Sonny Michel, I think that he should be in that 2-3 range. I think clearly there's a big drop off for those that believe in Geis. There's a clear drop off after 3. If you don't believe in Geis, there's a clear drop off after 2. And obviously there's a gap between Barkley and Michel as well. But I think that all we really wanted to see from Michel was the volume, and kind of it's forced the Patriots' hand with some injuries, along with the fact that Michel has played well with the opportunities. So, I mean, he's getting the RB opportunities that a first-round running back should be getting. Rashad Penny.
Come on, Mike Davis. He's outplaying him, baby.
Okay, yeah. So I really like what I've seen from Michel so far. But of the two, certainly, I think White is the better dynasty buy.
Yeah, because is White? I mean, and this is where, like, valuation wise, is he in that, like, between a first and a second valuation right now, or you think he's clearly solidified in the first round of, like, the 110 spot?
I don't think you'll see him traded for a first. So I think but less than a first, more than a second.
And I mean, I don't know. It seems too high for White for me. He just. But maybe I'm wrong. I mean, I could be very, very wrong here. They just when he was in there for years, they've never been that interested in using him. But maybe he did gain the trust of the whole offense, and he's been very, very productive. As mentioned, the RB7 currently. So I don't know. I just have a tough time stomaching that one. I have a much easier time stomaching the Michel price tag right now. So I don't know. I think I disagree with you. I think the buy being Michel, wait for him to have a couple down games, ideally, and then buy him.
Yeah, I'm just not sure those down games are really coming. I think that he's going to get that workload that he needs to continue producing points, other than maybe an injury.
Yeah, and maybe an injury is a valid point too, but hopefully not. Okay, let's go ahead and move on. Did you have anything else there, or were you about to move on?
No, moving on.
Okay, let's move on. And to another player that I really like this preseason, and that's Nyheim Hines, a guy who seems to be carving out a role. And what did he have? 15 targets or something outrageous this last week. But he's been completely nuts, just catching all sorts of footballs in that high passing offense. And a guy that seems to have the trust of the team currently. He had 9 targets last week, 11 targets the week prior, and then he got 15 runs last week too, with everybody out. So this is a guy that quietly has become very, very valuable. And I guess the question, Nathan, for this podcast purpose is, does he have long-term dynasty value?
I'm starting to think he might. I think that a lot of the preseason talk on Dynasty Twitter was that Wilkins was looking good in preseason. Hines looked like he couldn't do anything, couldn't pass block, couldn't even run between the tackles.
Right, fumbled all the time, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's clearly looking like Hines is the better back between the two. He was drafted before Wilkins, so that would make sense. And also, he has the receiving ability in an offense that's going to be pass heavy. Andrew Luck has had like the 2 pass heaviest games of his career in the last 2 games, and they were 4 days apart from each other.
He passed 60 times last week? It was ridiculous.
Like 56 the week before. So his passing numbers have been huge, and that's good for the value of Nyheim Hines in the short term, and even in the long term. Certainly, obviously, Andrew Luck's not going to sustain 56 passes a game, but Hines is going to be a guy that when the team has to pass, he's going to be benefiting from it, especially when, they don't really have anything after T.Y. Hilton, and T.Y. Hilton was out last week. So,
yep.
So, yeah, I'm starting to buy in on Hines a little bit. It's one of those things that I'm kind of too late, because I was kind of buying into the preseason, Wilkins is the runner and Hines is not looking good. And I was like, okay, well, I'm glad I didn't get any shares. And I'm like, oops, didn't get any shares. So,
yeah. Well, and Hines was cheap then, too, because there were a couple that I bought for third-round picks, and he was drafted in the third in a couple places. So, that gamble luckily paid off. And also worth mentioning, Hines right now, the RB13. So the dude's insanely productive and looks to be slotting himself even more of a role.
And that's basically in 2 games too.
Right. No, exactly. That's what I'm saying is he's basically slotted his role now and he's just going to explode. So let's talk about Naheem's value, because I think this is somebody who you can actually buy right now, because somebody's going to like, oh, I drafted him in the 3rd. I can cash out now, because I think his value is in the 2nd round, right?
I mean, I'd say he's more valuable than White, and I said that White is less than a first, more than a second. So I mean,
no. I mean, you think he's more valuable. You think on the dynasty trade market right now that people prefer Hines over White?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Then,
because of the youth, because of the Andrew Luck factor, and because people never trust Patriots running backs.
I mean, there is truth to that, which is at this point it's absurd. But I'm actually putting it on Twitter right now because I'm curious as to what they think. So, Nathan, I'm going to need you to continue to float the show. Go ahead.
All right, let's float the show onto our app. We have our good friends, very, very good friends, RotoQL. Want an unfair advantage to dominate your fantasy football league? Well, look no further and download SquadQL, the only mobile app you need to crush your friends and rivals this year. SquadQL recommends the best starting lineup for you each week based on your starters, bench, and free agent pool. You may ask, how does SquadQL actually do this? The app connects directly with your Yahoo, ESPN, and CBS leagues, pulling in your actual roster and your league scoring system. SquadQL provides waiver and trade recommendations. Plus, the app gives you player rankings each week, and it's all based on your league settings. SquadQL truly is your go-to app this fantasy football season. Head to squadql.com to download SquadQL, your all-in-one fantasy football manager. SquadQL is brought to you by the creators of RotoQL, the leading daily fantasy lineup optimizer trusted by 100,000 DFS players. You can also download RotoQL for free for both Apple and Android. And, you know, this app is so great when you have really bad quarterbacks and tight ends, and especially from a redraft perspective, because you're like, oh, my quarterbacks suck. And then you see on the waiver wire, oh, Bortles is projected to score 25 points this week. And then you just drop your quarterback and pick up Blake Bortles. So if you're streaming, it's a great way to, find, oh, is my starting quarterback better than the guy on the waiver wire? And he's probably not.
Yeah, absolutely true. Absolutely true. So we thank them for their sponsorship. And Nathan, I thank you for, I was expecting you to float the show through some terribleness, yet somehow you actually did something productive for the show and told the readers about RotoQL. Well played, sir. Well played. And readers, I mean listeners. Quit reading this podcast, man.
Alrighty, let's continue on this podcast. It's going to be a little bit of a quick show. Remember back when we said this was going to be a 30-minute podcast? We might actually be around that this time. So
I know. Well, all the listeners who love us are probably going to be real, which I hope is all, but are going to be real sad that it's so quick. But yeah, Dan really brings the heat, brings the dog poop talk, and we just haven't had that this episode.
Yeah, pretty much every episode, and that was probably going too far into the weeds, but every episode we have without Dan, Dan will come on the next show that was a lot of content. Good stuff, guys. And that's his way of saying, hey, you guys didn't talk about poop enough.
That is true. That's absolutely true. All right, let's pivot from poop and talk about your boy Nathan coming back. And I think it's the Fitzmagic era is over, and it looks like Winston is back in charge of the helm. And I think kind of quietly. So unless you were watching those games, I'm not sure that the percentage of dynasty owners are aware that Fitzpatrick is no longer starting. So I guess my question is, first, I think everybody already missed their buying opportunity for Winston if they wanted to go out and get him. But is there still a window that exists right now?
I think there is. The problem with Winston is that he has had some very bad interceptions throughout his career. He's been a turnover machine. And when he came in the second half against the Bears, he had some more of those turnovers. So, he kind of showed the fears that I had when we were talking about early in the season when Ryan Fitzpatrick was, exploding in those first 2 games. I was like, oh, James is going to come in and ruin this with turnovers, da-da-da-da. Well, it turned out Fitzpatrick did it on his own by ruining it with turnovers.
Yeah.
But now –
granted, you're playing the Bears. What did they – it's to be expected.
Yeah, but with Winston back, I think there's still a window of people thinking Winston was really bad last year. Winston wasn't great to start, his first half of the year. And so we'll see. But I think that there's certainly a high range of outcomes where he, just explodes like Fitzpatrick did with this receiving core of Deshaun Jackson, Mike Evans, and Chris Godwin, and even Cameron Brate, his boyfriend, as you like to call him.
Yes.
There's so many weapons in that Buccaneer offense. And, Chris Godwin is a year older and more experienced, and he's playing a lot better than he did in his rookie year, more involved in his rookie year. So I think that Winston is the type of guy who could put up a top 5 quarterback week this week, and then his price will skyrocket back up to top 6, top 7 Dynasty quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
But I think for today, there is a little bit of a window that if you're a true Winston believer, you can go out, and acquire him for like a couple first and super flex, or you can acquire him for like a second and a third and a 1 QB league, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I can't disagree. Yeah, it's an interesting spot, and it's so crazy. And there is probably a dynasty lesson here too. And like, people were so high on Winston not a year ago, and now people are just poo-pooing him left and right. And the guy's been exactly who he is the whole time, and was coming off a suspension. So, yeah, if there's a window to buy, I mean, at first in Superflex, if you're able to do it, that seems like a no-brainer. I mean, what are the odds out of Tampa Bay, Nathan, since you live there, that he's going to lose his job here in the next couple of years? It's very unlikely, right?
I think that if Jameis Winston is not the Tampa Bay Buccaneers quarterback in 2019, it'll be because the front office doesn't want to deal with the off-the-field stuff. But there's not enough quarterback talent in the NFL for Jameis Winston not to be a starting quarterback for the next 4 or 5 years.
Yep, I can't disagree with you there. So Winston's kind of a sneaky buy, but you really, I think, missed the window by having a little bit of foresight to go buy him while Fitzmagic was blowing up, because this was never going to last forever.
But the thing is, no one was saying, "Oh, Fitzpatrick's going to last the whole year." So I mean,
dude, that's not true. People were saying that.
And they were stupid for saying that.
Right. I agree with you. I'm just saying I think you're giving people too much credit, because there was most certainly a community that believed that how in the world would they start Winston again with how well Fitzpatrick is playing? And literally he just threw him to the Wolves. Dirk Cutter threw him to the Wolves and the Bears and was like, oh, well, I guess he can't move the football against the Bears. Better get Winston in here. Oh, look, he can't move the football against the Bears either. Well, that's not shocking. It was very fortunate, because if they were playing like a sieve of a defense, like this Redskins defense seems to be right now on television, that would have been very much more difficult, because Fitzpatrick probably would have been actually good.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to a trio of wide receivers. We don't have to really go in depth on any of these guys, but we can just do quick hitters. We have David Moore of the Seahawks, Trent Taylor of the 49ers, and Rashard Higgins. If you want to take one of these guys to be, your bye week starter, your injury fill-in, which one of these guys do you think has some, not long-term as in multiple seasons, but long-term value this season?
I'm going to go with Trent Taylor as being probably the most interesting out of this group. Young guy, has had hype in the past, and seems like he's starting to carve out a role. And this offense and this defense looks like a sieve as well. So they're going to be, they're trash. I just think we haven't seen fully from Trent Taylor yet what he's going to bring to the table, and he's a guy that intrigues me. I think we already know what Rashard Higgins is. Nothing more than a possession wide receiver, and David Moore, I didn't even know who he was until last week.
Yeah, I think Moore would have been more interesting if Baldwin was still hurt. But once he is still hurt, he's still recovering from the injury.
Right.
But once he's recovered, once he's back to being the wide receiver one, getting all those targets, and Tyler Lockett's had an outstanding start to the year. He's like a top 15 wide receiver right now. That pretty much puts David Moore out of the picture. But I think that he has the most intriguing offense to be a part of, because I think that Wilson's going to have to be pass heavy throughout the rest of the season. But yeah, I would kind of agree with you. I think that Higgins is just a guy, and Trent Taylor probably is just a guy too. But there's enough intrigue in that offense, and that team is bad. That team's going to be down by a lot of points. They're going to have to pass a lot.
Well, and I think we've seen Higgins at this, and I completely agree. Taylor could be just a guy, but we've at least seen what Higgins is. And at this point, we have not seen what Taylor is. And so far, what we've seen has been pretty decent.
All right, let's go with another trio of wide receivers. These are all rookie wide receivers. It'll be Christian Kirk, Kiki Kuchi, and Valdez Scantling. I'll start us off with Valdez Scantling. Go Bulls, USF Bowl, now Green Bay Packer. So now, for everyone who cares, the Green Bay Packers have a guy I went to high school with and a guy I went to college with. So there you go. And
well, congrats to the Packers on that.
Yep. And then, anyways, so Valdez Scantling, it's interesting because there was all the hype around Equanimeous St. Brown, but it seems that Valdez Scantling's the one that's carved out the role as the wide receiver 3 in that offense when all the injuries happen, basically. But I think he's an interesting talent, a guy who could be a deep threat long term. So it's kind of just trusting, okay, he's won the depth chart battle between Jamon Moore and Quinn St. Brown. So that's good news for him long term and short term. He's going to get the looks right now. So, I mean, right now, I'd give a third for Valdez-Scantling, no problem. You probably can't do that after this weekend in particular, but I think that he's a pretty safe investment at this point.
Yeah, and he's a guy, to me, that is interesting because I don't think Cobb's there next year. I think Cobb's deal is up, and these younger wide receivers are going to come in, and he seems to be the guy who is getting the opportunities. Although I will point out Brown got 5 targets and had 3 catches for 90, so even flashed a little bit as well in this game. Now, that being said, Aaron Rodgers went out of his mind at the end of the game and threw for, 450 yards or something absurd. But, I mean, St. Brown did something. And for as much as Dynasty Twitter was obsessed with him before he fell in the draft, I'm actually a little bit shocked we haven't heard more takes of intrigue and interest in St. Brown after that game stepping in. But yeah, I think how do we say his last name? Scantling, Vasquez Scantling. Oh man, I gotta practice that one. But yeah, he's looked the best, and I think he's clearly got the. If you're buying a guy who's got for a role next year, he's a guy who's very interesting. So let's maybe talk about price tag for him and what you would be wanting to target and pay for him if you can make it happen.
I don't think you can pay a second yet, so I think it's a third. And if you want to try and throw on some fourths, I don't really care about that. But yeah, I think that he's worth less than a second, more than a third.
I mean, at that price tag, I'm in. If I can get him for a third, I think I'm interested in buying him. Now is probably not the time. Wait for Cobb to come back, him to kind of step back into the player who's not on the field all the time. But once that happens, I think you can potentially float a third out there, get paid, and I think next year you're going to have the player who's got a role in an Aaron Rodgers offense, which is worth a ton.
Particularly if it's a non-Mike McCarthy offense, who knows?
Well, we'll see. They're very, very stingy about keeping him on board. So because he makes all these great decisions.
All right. Just to talk quickly about the other two, it seems like Keke Coutee, however you say his name, is kind of taking over that wide receiver 2 role, at least volume-wise. Maybe Will Fuller gets the red zone targets and maybe even the deeper looks, but I think that Coutee is going to be getting the wide receiver 2 looks there. And then do you agree, disagree on that one?
No, I think he's looked great. Another player that I really wish I'd taken a shot in the 4th round on. I didn't take one shot on him in any of my drafts, and I'm a little sad about it because he's looked fantastic. But I mean, he looks like a great slot receiver. But in a PPR league, man, he just seems like his floor is going to be 10 points the rest of the year.
Yeah. I mean, I've got a couple of shares, but I do wish I had more as well. I'm sure everyone is at this point.
Yeah, for a 4th round pick, and I mean, he was on the waiver wire after some of the drafts. Like I went and picked him up in or actually I went and tried to pick him up in our Mile High Dynasty League and got sniped. But he made it all the way through, and he went through waivers and was picked up finally.
And Christian Kirk, everyone has been fantasizing about the Rosen-Christian Kirk connection over the next few years, but it finally happened, and not finally. So obviously we're very early in the season, but yes. The Rosen-Kirk connection did begin with a 75-yard touchdown. Good news for Kirk, good news for Rosen as well to just kind of get that rapport going. I don't think anyone's expecting anything out of Kirk or Rosen from a fantasy perspective this year. But anything you see now is just like, oh, this is a glimpse of what we can see next year as the volume continues to increase.
Yeah, I totally agree. I also have a question for you, Nathan. Are you eating like Halloween candy over there? I'm getting
no. I'm like fidgeting with a.
I'm like he is having a Reese's Pieces, no problem over there. It is like a cackling fire in my ear, which I'm sure the listeners are appreciating. By the way,
I didn't even notice I was doing it until you said it.
It's all good. Yeah, Kirk's definitely the most valuable out of this group, and I think he was the 12th most valuable rookie in the most recent ADP from McDowell. So he's a guy whose arrow I think is trending up because I can't imagine this last game where he blew up was included in that particular ADP round. So I don't know. I expect Kirk's value to continue to climb. So what's the valuation for Kirk right now? I mean, was being drafted at the end of the 1st round, beginning of the 2nd round in the offseason. Now he's got to be worth probably a mid-late-ish first at this point, maybe a little bit more.
I mean, I don't think he's done enough to really gain value right now. I think it's pretty much where he's been. especially because, we do this every year where we expect the world from a rookie, and then they produce like normal rookie numbers,
right.
And then we get rookie fever. And, by May or June, Christian Kirk will go for like the 202.
Yep. Well, and it'll be interesting. I don't know. Kirk's a guy that maybe is another guy that I might go by. Another guy I have very little shares of. I was reaching for the other wide receivers there, which I guess it worked out for like Ridley and Sutton. Like they all look great right there. So, but not a guy that I ended up adding to my team. One thing I do want to point out, Nathan, I've put up our dynasty poll that we brought up, and that's Nyheim Hines, also misspelled Nyheim and called him Hyheim Hines twice in this poll. So kudos to me. But he is currently losing 77-23 against James White. So James White significantly more valuable per Dynasty Twitter.
That's interesting. Well, that means that there's still time to buy Hines then.
That's absolutely correct. And that was the point of that one. So I completely agree. Okay, well, let's go ahead and wrap the show here. Again, a very quick show, Nathan. It's been a lot of fun hanging out with you, but I think we're to the end of our agenda here.
Wait, what? Are you skipping the last part of the agenda?
No, I'm not skipping it. I said we've got one more. I'm just
okay.
sad that it's over.
Okay.
Calm down. Wow. Okay. And this is play the sad funeral music for my teams, because this is a guy I own in way too many places, and that is Devontae Parker is on the block for the Dolphins and continues to be inactive week in, week out with mysterious injuries that might or might not exist. What do you make of this, Nathan? I mean, it's all bad news for Parker is the way I'm reading this.
Yeah, I love how dumb NFL teams are. The Dolphins are like, we're very mad at Devontae Parker for being injured. And it's like, wait, what? Like, you can't be like, no, we're going to trade you because you're injured. Like, you can. Obviously, they're perfectly allowed to. But that's the dumbest reason to trade a player ever. Oh, he's injured and he's not playing, so we need to trade him. Because that's contagious. It's contagious, Eric.
Getting injured, yeah, of course. I mean, whew, man, it's talk about a guy who just – I'll just talk because I really think his dynasty value is basically about to fall off the face of the earth. He seems to be a toxic individual in the locker room, seems to have an attitude, seems to have work ethic issues from everything you've read, from everything you read. I obviously don't know personally, but it's a guy that like on the tape, and he looked so amazing in college and so productive and it was injured that first year. People were still all in on him and just has never come around and seems like he might not ever come around. So I'd like to pour one out for all of those 103s that I spent on Devontae Parker.
Yeah, and this is the type of scenario where you kind of you sell something in your head for all your shares that you have. You're like, oh, well, maybe a new team, new scenario, new this, new that. We'll do something. And every time we tell ourselves that story, it ends up being the same thing. I mean, we did it like I did it with Corey Coleman 4 times.
Yes, I was about to bring up Corey Coleman. That's
we went from the Browns, the Bills, the Patriots, down, back to the Patriots. Corey Coleman, his career's over. Just to close out the podcast with the take, Dez Bryant, his career is over.
Ooh, you don't think he's coming back at all? He does keep making mysterious tweets. I don't know. I think the Browns could be picking him up this week. You want to make a dog do bet on it?
I'm done with dog do bets.
Okay, so we're both on. I mean, is this the time? I think this discussion is highlighting that I need to go and just sell Devontae Parker for whatever.
No, because you can't sell him for even a 4th-round pick right now.
I think I could sell him for a 4th-round pick. What would you sell him for a 3rd? I think I'm going to go try to shop him for 3rds.
I feel like if I'm doing that, I'm doing it just to get him off my roster, which isn't the worst reason in the world to do it. But I think I did, like, and we talk about this all the time. Instead of doing a 3rd, do Parker in a 3rd for a 2nd. Just so you tell yourself the story. Oh, maybe that 2nd-round player will turn into something, and Parker is never going to turn into something. So I don't think I can do a 3rd. I think I'd do Parker in a 3rd for a 2nd.
No, I like that deal too. Or the other strategy, as always in these situations, is wait till he gets traded. There's a little bit of hype and unload him. That's the other strategy that I am potentially interested in. I'm just worried they're going to have to drop him.
Yeah, and then you have a Coleman situation.
And then I have a full Coleman situation. And how much do you wish right now you'd gotten a 3rd for your Coleman?
I mean, I'll take a 5th for Coleman right now.
I know what you will now, but you wish you could go back in time and just when he first got traded, say, okay, now I'll trade him for a 2nd, all the seconds. All right. Well, let's go ahead and wrap up the show here. Yeah, like I said, the official count. Let's go ahead and count. Yes, 80% James White over Nyheim Hines right now. That is maybe the moral of this episode is it's time to go buy Nyheim Hines in leagues where you need a little bit of running back help. And even once you don't.
For sure.
Very good. All right, I'd like to thank. Sorry, got deer in headlights there. I'd like to thank our sponsor, RotoQL, for sponsoring the show. I want to thank the listeners for listening, and go leave 5-star ratings and reviews if you love this podcast and enjoy it. It helps listeners find us. And to be honest, you're already like 6 weeks into the season. You're already 6-0 probably at week 5. So it's like having your other league mates learn about this podcast at this point isn't going to hurt you that bad. It's cool. It's cool. All the good takes, all the things you've gotten, all the Mike Davis shares you picked up before he exploded are gonna come back to play well. So 5-star ratings and reviews, always appreciated. Telling your friends about it, always appreciated as well. Oh, Nathan, actually, I have a story for the end of the podcast. It's not going to be that good, but my wife today shared that I have a podcast with all of her fellow teachers in an icebreaker today.
And male or female?
What? Male what?
Male or female teachers?
No, all the teachers is who she like. They were like at an assembly talking about. Like, give us the.
And my husband has a podcast.
Well, no, they were like talking about podcasts, and Allison's like, "Well, I don't listen to podcasts, but my husband has a podcast." So, and then they looked. Apparently, somebody's like looking it up, like saying these ratings are legit. So do that and say it. And they thought we had a legitimate podcast. Jokes on them, though.
What are you talking about? We're legit. Too legit to quit.
Yeah, I don't know about that. We could quit. I don't know that we're legit, but okay. On that note, I think we have to quit and call it a day and go back to watching Monday Night Football. Hope you guys have a wonderful day, have a wonderful week, and good luck next week. We'll catch up with you then. Bye.